Hey, howdy. Hey, my brewing brothers and sisters.
Greetings, Cretan.
It's the Cretan himself. Ah, yes. It is. Yes.
Nothing. It sounds like my microphone's overdriving a little bit.
You sound fine.
Good.
Don't sound as good as me, but
It's understandable.
You know who sounds good, looks good, is good.
That would be RJ and Josh.
They absolutely. But I was thinking of somebody else.
Oh, okay. Doug.
Not Doug. Our good
Okay.
friend John Blickman.
John Blickman. Yes, of course. Of course.
He's a beautiful man.
Indeed. Yeah.
A beautiful friend. He's a beautiful friend to all of you because he has been paying for the show so you don't have to for 15 freaking years. And during that time, he's also been making some amazing brewing equipment. Everything from, your more, just solid, fundamental pieces of brewing equipment in the Anvil line up to, through the Blickman line of more bells and whistles, more features, more convenience, more repeatability, and on up to the Pro line where you're getting, the ability to do, 5, 10 barrel batches, whatever you want. They've got the smaller Pro line to the bigger Pro line. They got everything. If you're ordering brewing equipment, you do yourself a favor and check out blickmanengineering.com. Lots of goodies there and lots of knowledge and lots of good people. So check them out, support them. You can send an email to John Blickman, use feedback at blickmanengineering.com.
That's right.
Go straight to John Blickman. You can tell him how much you love the show or hate the show, whatever. And apparently, Rich says John B gives a back rub for every top tier system you buy. There you go. I did not know that, but yeah, he can be a little touchy feely. I don't know. It's apparently him and Joe Biden. I share that similarity.
Sounds like you. Wow.
Oh, really?
A lot of feedback.
A lot of feedback.
Yeah, at least when I spoke. I wonder if I think it must be due to the Facebook Live, because I don't remember it having these issues before.
Okay. Well, let's see. Is that better?
We're not getting the Darth Vader sounds now.
Okay. Well, you will have to read the questions coming in on Facebook.
Okay.
If you're listening live and watching on Facebook, you can, in the comments section there, you can ask any questions you want, and we possibly can get to them. Depends on whether John sees them or not.
I'll do my best.
He will do his best. That sounds great, John. That sounds great. Okay. Fred asks, Dear John, he said he sent this to your personal address as well as sending it to the Brew Strong address. So he's hoping one of these will get to you. Confusion reigns when specifying the optimum pH for mashing. At different times, the pH is expressed as measured at room temperature, and at other times, the pH is specified at mash temperatures. You yourself apparently confused these on the last Brew Strong show regarding adjustment of brewing water. You referred to targeting a pH of 5.2 to 5.6 measured at room temperature, but in the very nomogram you described on the show, note 3 states For best results, the mash pH should always be between 5.2 to 5.6, regardless of beer style when measured at mash temperature. And also on the nomogram, is the following. Note 2, the actual pH of the mash temperature, approximately 150 degrees Fahrenheit, is typically 0.35 pH less than it measures at room temperature. It's clear that you have gone to the trouble to clarify this distinction, but because of the slips that you propagated, confusion abounds. Please confirm the information in the nomogram. Note 3 is the closest to being correct. Fred wants to know, John, you screwed up. What's the matter with you, John?
Yeah. Different versions. Yeah, in the previous edition, the third edition, it did say at mash temperature as opposed to room. I got that clarified to me, corrected it in the fourth edition book. Yes, the correct mash pH range that we're looking for is 5.2 to 5.6, measured at room temperature with a mash sample. pH will be about 0.3 lower if measured at mash temperature. So if you're measuring directly into your mash, which I don't recommend because it's hard on your pH meter, there you would correspondingly be looking for 4.9 to 5.3, roughly. But that 0.3 difference varies between styles due to the different amounts of buffering and different kinds of wort. You know, pale wort, stout wort, low gravity, high gravity. A lot of factors affect how much that pH changes due to temperature. But in general, 5.2 to 5.6 is what we're looking for at room temperature. If your mash pH is high, it will still work, okay? We prefer a little lower, but not too low, because that helps improve the fineness of beer flavor. If you go too low, if you go below 5 at room temperature, then you tend to shut down your amylase enzymes and you lose conversion and yield. But high pH, even if it's 6.5, it's going to convert great. Trouble is, it'll taste really harsh and astringent. That's due to your tannin extraction at those pH levels. So there's the reason for the range we recommend.
Yep. Yeah. Don't measure your mash temp or your pH at mash temps. You want to chill your sample down and measure that. All right. Let's see here. Wesley asks, Lord Jay-Z and Vassal Palmer. Let's see. I recently brewed an extract beer kit for a Belgian strong dark ale from Northern Brewer, their number 8 kit. And I had more problems than I cared to think about. First, I couldn't brew the kit for a month after it was ordered, and it spent 2 weeks at room temperature. During the brewing itself, the stove burner died about halfway during the boil, stayed at 207. So I had to transfer burners. Temp never dropped below 206 at that time. At the same time, I had to do 2 hop additions, add 2 pounds of DME, 2 pounds of candy sugar, 15 ounces of priming sugar, and fought boilovers through the whole process, forcing it to take till boil end to do all this. That said, OG was in the range of being 1080. Fermentation was rapid using 1 liter starter, so I know I underpitched a bit, but fermentation started within hours and was putting out more CO2 than the airlock could deal with. Overnight, the bucket blew its lid and was open for probably 2 hours before I woke up. I quickly mixed a bunch of sanitizer, sanitized the lid, and wiped down the rim of the bucket with a sanitizer soaked rag and resealed the bucket. There were no further incidents. Ambient air temperature above and around the bucket maintained 70 degrees for the duration of the ferment. Final gravity was 1015.
Sounds good.
I transferred the beer to the carboy for 1 month to age before bottling. At bottling, mixed it with 140 grams of table sugar and was worried about not carbonating due to lack of yeast and held for the bulks. So for carbonate, what? You guys can't drink when you write these questions, because we drink when we read them, and then it's double drinking. It's kind of a game of telephone. So targeting carbonation at 75 Fahrenheit, except for a power outage lasting 2 days, dropped over to the room to 50 to 55. Carbonation seems to come along fine, if just a little slow. I opened one to drink and it produced a 1/4 to 1/2 inch head. So that seems encouraging, but while drinking it, I'm worried the flavor is just off, if not just completely. It's kind of a mixture of yeasty and green flavor. Can't put my finger on it. It's not acetaldehyde because I've had that one happen to me before. It's like a really assertive hop green flavor that's bitter and next to no malt flavor. Writing this, debating whether or not I should dump the beer or seeing if aging can save it. Whew, that's a long one.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure what happened here. One is it is a high gravity beer with a considerable amount of adjuncts.
Yeah.
2 pounds candy sugar, 2 pounds DME, and then some mashing, I guess. Oh, it's extract beer kit. I don't know if there's grains in that kit or not, but if it's 2 pounds DME and 2 pounds candy sugar, that is a lot of simple sugars. And if the ambient room is 70 degrees, I always stress that fermentation temperature is not the room temperature. It's the temperature of the actual liquid fermenting. You cannot ferment at, if it says ferment at 70 degrees, it doesn't mean the room should be 70 degrees. It means the actual liquid should be 70 degrees. And what happens in a 70-degree room is that thing probably got up into the 90s during fermentation, especially a big vigorous fermentation like that. I bet you it generated a lot of heat, a lot of simple sugars. You're dealing with a lot of alcohols, and you're probably dealing with a considerable amount of acetaldehyde. It may be masked in there with other stuff, but that's the issue there, I think. What do you say, John?
Yeah, that seems quite reasonable. I think, he's not getting a lot of malt flavor because of the proportion of simple sugars. The 1 month in the carboy prior to bottling seems excessive. So slow carbonation in the bottle, chances of oxidation, which also cut into your malt character. Yeah.
I was going to read a question by Joe Zassa about developing and maintaining a house yeast.
Okay.
But I think that's a good idea for a show.
Oh.
I think we're going to make a show out of that. So I'm forwarding it to both of us to make a show out of. So Joe, we'll make a show out of that one. That's a good idea. Let's see here. We should take a short break. When we come back, we'll have more of your questions right after this.
So
there you go.
Yeah, Jay-Z's Medical Corner, great idea. Love to hear what's new and synthetic in your life.
People always are asking for Jay-Z's Medical Corner. Chris says, hey guys, I have 2 all grain sessions under my belt, and I have a question for you about something that strikes me as odd. Both batches have come out with much higher original gravities than I was expecting, and I'm wondering what I'm doing or not doing that causes this. First, my all grain beer was the English Mild from Northern Brewer. The target original gravity was 1032, but the actual was 1040. The second all grain batch was Northern Brewer's Oktoberfest, which has a target of 1058, but the actual was 1066. Both were done using the batch sparging method in igloo coolers at a mash temperature of right at 152 degrees. The mild was mashed with a ratio of about 1.5 quarts of water per pound of grain, while the Oktoberfest was mashed at a ratio of about 1.25 quarts water per pound of grain. We circulated each one to the tune of about a quart of wort. It was running nice and clean by then, such that the first runnings of about 2 gallons took nearly 25 minutes. The remaining 4 gallons of second runnings loudered for about 45 minutes. So sparge sparge water was right at 170 degrees. I haven't tasted the Oktoberfest. It's still in primary, but I've tasted the mild. It's good flavor. Finished at 1012 for an ABV of 3.68 and a paired attenuation of 70%. That is the Y yeast, Neo Britannia yeast. The only thing about the mild, however, is that it does seem to have a fairly thin taste to it. The mouthfeel is not very robust. I'm not sure if this is due to the fact that I may have messed something up during the mash or that I carbonated pretty low using only half cup of corn syrup for 5-gallon batch. If there's any other data you need, let me know. It sounds like I tried to take decent notes during the brew day. Sounds like he did. Very good job there, Chris from Tennessee. All right. So my initial thoughts are the kits that a lot of homebrew shops put out are, when they suggest an OG or something like that, they're assuming people don't do a very good job of, mashing. They do an okay job of mashing and, and sparging, and you're just doing a much better job of it than they expect. And that's why your OG was a bit higher. I think on the mild, a mild's always going to have a pretty low, initial gravity and finishing gravity. It should taste, pretty mildish, and it sounds like it's right. You want a lower carbonation. If you're serving it, try stirring it up, putting, one of the things that they do in England, certain parts of England, and it's fighting words depending, is to use a sparkler and to force it through to create a frothy, creamy kind of feel. You have to be into that kind of beer for it. And it may also be just the recipe. I highly recommend a little book called Brewing Classic Styles, and the mild in there is quite good. Let's see what else. So just
volume, final boil volume has a lot to do with it.
Yep. It could be that your volume was off, as John suggests. I mean, what else could it be, John?
You may have boiled it down a little bit further, thereby increasing the final gravity. The malt amounts that they actually sent you may be bumped up a little bit, another couple handfuls, another half pound included, just, to make sure you got your money's worth. And if you're doing a good job, that could easily bump up your gravity a few points.
Right. That brings up a good point. Always weigh the ingredients that were sent to you to make sure that it is correct. Because somebody could screw up at the brew shop and overweigh it, or just be careless in filling bags or whatever it might be. So just really confirm it. I think any home brewer needs to have 2 good scales, one for measuring hops, which is also appropriate for measuring cocaine, and another for measuring your malts. And you can get them so cheap, good scales off of eBay or Amazon. There's no reason not to have them, or check out your local homebrew shop. I bet you they have good ones. And if you support your local homebrew shop, they will be there when you're desperate for, my yeast is dead, or I don't have the hops that I thought I had, or I'm out of this, or I'm out of that. That's why you need to go and buy stuff from your local homebrew shop. Yes, maybe it is $1 more for something, or a couple of bucks more, but when you buy from them, it keeps them in business. They also bring more homebrewers into the fold, into the hobby, and then you've got more friends that share your passion around you. So 100% support your local homebrew shop. They're critical to the survival of the sport, the hobby. And you want them there.
One one follow-up to the previous guy.
Mhm.
Calculate your efficiencies when when your numbers are different than expected. You know, and calculate the expected efficiency of the kit. You know, if they tell you the anticipated gravity OG is 1050 and they're sending you 12 pounds of grain, you know, actually, you know, if you calculate out that's like a 60% efficiency. If you're brewing at 75% or 80% efficiency, yeah, you're going to get way over that anticipated gravity. So, you know, run the numbers, do the calculations. They're documented in How to Brew and Brewing Classic Styles. That will help give you some better information on what you might expect.
I was going to say, you know, get yourself a copy of How to Brew, because there you have the all the calculations you need for, you know, all these basics of brewing. They're in there. Let's see here. Adam was asking, I was reading Farmhouse Ales from Brewers Publications the other day, particularly the section on Bière de Garde. The author mentions that lagering this beer will help reduce esters. I know that the majority of esters are produced during the growth phase. I also know that esters can oxidize, lending other flavors and aromas. I have never heard that esters can be lagered out of a beer. Can you explain this? Thanks, Mills.
I think that's in error.
I would agree that the author may be mistaken. Perhaps some brewery said that was the case, or maybe, you know, I guess it's possible Adam is somehow misquoting it, but I don't know. He seems pretty clear on that. The ester, the compounds, the acids that are produced during fermentation, different phases of fermentation, which may be determined by things that happen during the growth phase. It's a complex process, fermentation. But, you know, you're right, Adam, that you know, that process of fermentation is producing the compounds that will become esters. And esterification of alcohols, the acids and the alcohols combining to become these esters will happen. It can happen during fermentation, but also it can happen, you know, post fermentation. Over time, esters can pick up as well. I mean, once an ester has been formed, I don't know the process of ester reduction.
Well, they can oxidize.
They can oxidize. Oxidation. Well, oxidation can change a lot of things, but I'm not sure that. Yeah, I don't know. Or, you know, they can change, but I don't think you're going to get rid of them. I don't think you can lager out esters.
Well, see, there's a point of what do I want to say, clarification there. You don't lager them out, you know, by say cold storage doesn't make esters go away. Oxidation, you know, exposure to oxygen or oxidizing elements within, you know, the beer, not necessarily molecular oxygen compounds that can cause chemical reactions with other compounds, could modify esters, say, convert them back.
And that's what Adam's saying. I also know that esters can be oxidized, leading to other flavors and aromas. But he's saying, I've never heard that esters can be lagered out of a beer.
Right. And I think maybe that's where I was saying, okay, just cold storage of lagers is not going to make them go away. I'm more familiar with esters being created during extended storage due to esterification, which is still a yeast function, a growth function, the combination of an unsaturated fatty acid with an alcohol to detoxify the yeast cell.
Yeah. All right. Good question, Adam Mills. Thank you. Let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll have more of your questions right after this. All right, we're back. Speaking of supporting a local homebrew shop, a great local homebrew shop up in the Reno area is Brew Chatter. Those folks, they're kind and funny and generous. And RJ and Josh, I love them both. Good people, and they're smart. And if you have questions about brewing, you can send them into, brewstrong@thebrewingnetwork.com, and we will eventually get to all of them. But a faster way maybe to stop in a Brew Chatter and just say, hey guys, I got this problem. Can you help me out? They know great beer, and they know great brewing, and they have the gear there for you. And while you're hanging out, you can have a pint. Often you can have a pint of Heretic. Good folks. So check them out. Brew Chatter, brewchatter.com. Tell Josh and RJ I sent you. Let's see here. Adam is asking, Andy from Arizona is asking, when creating a recipe, you can adjust the various amounts and types of malts, adjuncts, and hops to create a balanced flavor profile. For example, by adding American 2-row with Maris Otter, you get a different flavor than if you combine 2-row with Munich. Can different yeast strains be used in the same way? By using several yeast strains in the same fermentation to develop a balance of flavor. For example, I like some of the esters and spice notes produced by SAFBrew T58, but sometimes the esters are too distracting. I start the fermentation with a cleaner, less estery yeast, and then add some T58 afterwards towards the end of primary fermentation. Would I have any flavor impact to the beer? Also, some of the banana flavors in a wit or Hefeweizen are nice in moderation. There shouldn't be any really in a wit beer, but not if they are overpowering. Would the yeast byproducts balance out if 2 or more yeast strains are used, or would the population of one yeast monopolize fermentation and the flavor profile? Also, are there any other problems that might complicate trying to execute fermentation with more than one yeast strain? Do you know of any amateur professional brewers who do this? And if so, what yeast strains would be more likely to work well in tandem? P.S. Thanks for all you do for home brewing. I almost quit brewing after my first batch of beer, but after listening to approximately 70% of the archives and reading John Palmer's How to Brew and Jamel Zane's Chef and John Palmer's Brewing Classic Styles, I haven't brewed a bad batch since and have found a lifelong hobby. Thanks, Andy from Arizona.
Cool. Well, as our good friend Chris White says, it depends.
It depends.
Yeah, 2 or more yeast strains can create complexity of yeast character.
Mm-hmm.
It is a subtle effect, in my experience. It's not where you pick up beer A and beer B and it's like, wow, look at this difference. It's subtle. Very often a multi-strain will have, like Chris says, it depends. You can have enhanced esters, you can have subdued esters, you can have, any kind of character depending on the 2 or 3 yeasts you combine, and the proportions at the time of fermentation and the fermentation conditions and lots of other things. Do you use multiple yeast strains at Heretic for any beers?
We have. We've done a few. But not in any of our general regular production beers. Generally, have we started on one? We were doing some high gravity hazies, and we were mixing a hazy and a high gravity yeast to get the proper attenuation. But yeah, I think so. Generally, it's interesting because I think you can pitch, 50% of this, 50% of that, and you can get 50% of the flavors of each. The thing is, the flavors sometimes have an interaction, right? To where you get a different, character overall in some aspects. It's not like fermenting them separately and then just pouring the beers together and getting something different. I think that's one of the, if you really want to do it consistently, you would prepare your wort, you'd split it into 2 or 3, you'd pitch the yeast in each of these separately, and then you would blend the beers together. That's your way of really controlling it. When you pitch different yeast, different organisms into a given beer, the issue with that is the yeast will compete. And it's possible that they both just get along copacetically, or one kind of outstrips the other, and one's more efficient than the other. So you can get different characters. One of my favorite beers in the world is brewed by Harvey's out of England. And they have, I keep forgetting if it's 9 or 11 different organisms in their yeast culture, because they're open fermentation. They've been doing it for like 150 years or however long it's been. And these open squares, they've got this culture going in it that it's extremely complex. And if you were to take those out individually and ferment with them and then blend those 9 together, I don't think you'd end up with the same beer. I think there is an interaction of, well, this organism is acidifying while this other one is fermenting. And because this organism is now fermenting at, or this yeast is now fermenting at a lower pH than it normally would, it is producing more esters or less esters, or more this or more or less that, right? It changes the environment that yeast is acting within.
Right.
So that's the importance of these other organisms. Can they, the environment that they produce. So it's very tricky, and it's not, a simple thing. I was asked recently on a show, podcast out of England about, what would, if I could brew one beer that I don't brew, what would it be? And, it's Harvey's Best Bitter, because one, it's a great beer, but two, it's something I can't brew today. Most beers that other people brew, I think I could brew them. Give me, especially doing all those, can you brew it episodes. I learned a lot about brewing other people's beer and how to clone it, and doing, I can get pretty close. If there's a beer I want to brew, I can brew it. Yeah. The Harvey's, Best Bitter would be very difficult. That'd be very difficult because of the complexity of the organisms in there. I could kind of get in the general range of things, but I can't clone that beer. That's too tough. So,
right.
Good question, Andrew. Any questions in the comments?
Well, Travis brought up the question about pH meters with the connected temperature probe. Mm-hmm. And as I commented in that chat, pH meters with temperature probe, whether it's separate or built in, the purpose of that is the automatic temperature compensation, which is only designed to keep the meter calibrated at a different, and when it's measuring a sample, that's a different temperature than the calibration temperature. So if you calibrate it at room temperature and then measure a sample at, say, 90 degrees Fahrenheit, the thermometer and the ATC would compensate for that change in temperature of the sample and give you an accurate pH reading at 90 degrees. Doesn't account for the physical change in pH or the chemical change in pH due to temperature, that actual change. So that's why we still insist on room temperature measurements, so we can compare apples to apples. And then Lat 65 Brewing Company says, we need some good old Jay-Z's Medical Corner.
All right. So should I do it now or should I wait? I don't know. Guess you had a look on your face, John. So one of the things I realized, welcome to Jay-Z's Medical Corner. You know, one of the, if you're listening with small kids or people of delicate nature, tune away now. Turn the volume down or put some headphones on. No, one of the things I noticed about getting older is that, you know, it's possible to get essentially varicose veins in your scrotum, in the sac, right? In the boys, in the peaches. I don't know if it's the pressure of hanging or it's the vast size of the stones within the sac that is causing, you know, the pressure that
Bruising due to gravity.
makes it look like a freeway map of Los Angeles. I mean, you know, they are all there popping out purple, bold, bulging veins filled with blood, and it's quite concerning. It's quite concerning.
I can imagine. I confess I need to find a mirror if I wanted to self-inspect.
Right. Yeah, I would highly recommend everybody take a mirror down there and take a little perusal and see what's happening south of the navel. There's you know, sometimes something quite surprising down there, and yes, scrotal varicose veins are an actual thing, I think. And you know, I feel like I am one zipper accident away from bleeding out all over the floor. I'm you know, just nick one of them bad boys, and I think I got a gusher on me.
That could be bad. Yeah, I can
Bad.
imagine. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. In your next.
You probably didn't think today would go that way, but there it did. And so wraps up another Jay-Z's Medical Corner. All right. Let's see here. Jeff, he's got a yeast washing question. I was reading my trusty copy of Yeast, A Practical Guide to Fermentation. On page 170 about washing yeast, it says, working at a temperature of 36 to 40 Fahrenheit, 2 to 4 C, acidify water to pH 3 using food grade acid. My question is this: would food grade acid also include lactic acid? Thanks for the show. Yes, Jeff. Lactic acid is fine, phosphoric, whatever the acid you want to use. So there's yeast rinsing and there's yeast washing. And the purpose of yeast washing is when you have essentially contaminated yeast that has, you know, it's a mixture of yeast and bacteria. You use a low pH solution to rinse the yeast pitch to reduce the bacterial contamination level. So breweries do this that pasteurize their beer and, you know, don't want to pay for another pitch, things like that. I would highly, and I think I say in the book, you know, I highly recommend that you don't go through this process. It's stressful to the yeast. Is it pH 3 or pH 2? I can't remember, or 2 something. It's got to be pretty low. It's got to be low enough to kill off the yeast, but not too low to
kill off the bacteria.
I mean, to kill off the bacteria. Yeah. So it's got to be pretty low. But the thing being, if you don't, uh, you'll stress, you'll stress, you'll stress. That looked very odd, John. You'll stress, page 170. You'll stress the yeast by doing this, and you won't completely get rid of all the bacteria. So if you have a bacterial contamination, I would urge you to just dump that pitch and start with a new pitch and figure out where your contamination came from. Yeast rinsing is a very valuable tool and much less harmful to the yeast. If you have a clean pitch of yeast that just has an amount of trub you want to get rid of, you can shake that up with some sterile distilled water or sterile tap water. Shake that up and decant the clean yeast off of the trub. That'll drop really quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 2 to 2.5. So
yeah,
it
2 to 2.5. See, I knew it. pH 3, it was way too high. There you go. Thank you, John. I wish I had a copy of that book. That's a pretty good book. I remember writing it. Right. But good question, Jeff. All right. I'm just randomly picking questions here. I've got, I have not put any effort into
organizing.
Trying to do something specific. Aaron asks, Aaron from Pepperell, Massachusetts, also known as the middle of nowhere. He asks, I keep reading about extract twang. What do you and John think about this? Is it a legit fear? What can cause it? How can I avoid it? Also, when was the last time you guys brewed on a newbie-like setup? Extract, partial boil, minimum ferment, temp control. Thanks.
Extract twang, in my definition, is oxidation of malt extract. It is it results in very I don't know. I call it like ballpoint pen aroma. The smell of ink. It can be, they're just oxidation type aromas that can come from there for flavors that predominantly seem to be due to old extract, especially old liquid malt extract that's sat in a can for a couple of years, darker than intended and so on. Brewing with fresh malt extract, brewing with dry malt extract, which has better shelf stability, pretty much does away with it.
Right.
I mean, good extract beers, you cannot tell they're made with extract because of that twang.
I would agree. So the whole thing about extract twang is false. I think, you can make award-winning beer. I did with extract. Extract alone, extract with partial mash. I won, it was more about the process and fermentation. One thing I would say is about old extract. So recently, a new home brewer gave me a beer to try, and my comments back were, "This tastes like old ingredients. You must have used old, make sure you get fresh ingredients." He said, "Yeah, you're right. I got the ingredients like a year ago. I was too busy. I didn't brew. Of course, they're stored warm, and I could taste it." But I want to say that old ingredient character is more prevalent in hops. And so when people are talking about extract twang, I think it's often really the hops that are the issue. Because when you ferment something that is oxidized or staled, generally the yeast will clean it up and it won't taste nearly as bad as it might have been. I'm with John that there is some staling that goes on that may still be present. So you want to always just use fresh. When you get your ingredients, you buy it from a quality shop like Brew Chatter or More Beer. Um, they've got fresh ingredients. Brew right away. Don't buy it and think, oh, I'm going to brew 6 months, a year from now. Buy it, before you brew, and I think that helps. But I think the yeast will clean up some of that. But the thing the yeast cannot clean up is stale hops. You can buy hops.
Oxidized, cheesy.
You've got to, keep them in the freezer. You got to keep them in sealed bags in the freezer. And if you do, they're good for years. But if you don't, they're dead right away, and you'll taste them in your beer. And I think that is a lot of times what the old timers were talking about as far as extract twang. Malt extract. Today's modern malt extract is fantastic. These companies, that we're getting extract from, the only one that comes to mind is Muntons right now, but there's a bunch of them. They're fantastic. They really know what they're doing. It's really come a long way, and it really wasn't that bad back in the day. I think it just got a bad name because, brewers were, just negative on the whole aspect. So I would not hesitate to brew on extract. So the question is, second question or fourth question, whatever it is. Hey, all you people, one question per email. When was the last time you guys brewed on a newbie like setup? John?
Well, long time ago in terms of, for me, a newbie type setup is a cooler mash tun, or a something like that. I brewed in my Anvil Foundry a month ago.
Yeah.
So that's a
all-in-one extract
system.
with
extract system.
Perfect.
I haven't done that in, oh God, a year, 2 years.
Been a while for me.
Yeah.
I'd love to do it again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I enjoy the simple life. At some point, once I pierce a vein on my testicles, I will quit, and I will spend the rest of my life puttering around, visiting home brewers and brewing extract with partial mash.
There you go.
But
you could
yes
do an extract on that. 5 barrels.
Set up 5-barrel brew plant. It's weird because I think before I started, I would have looked at that as like, wow, that's pretty significant. I look at it today as just like, 5 barrels, man, what a waste of time. I could be brewing 30, the same amount of time. This is such a a burning of labor for not very much beer. It's like 5 barrels, 150 gallons of beer. That's nothing. What 150 barely wet your whistle.
Right.
But it's fun. I'm doing more strange things on it, so I'm enjoying that. It's hey, it's brewing. Any brewing's better than no brewing at all. All right. Come back. We'll wrap up right after this. All right, we're back. We're answering your questions live on Brew Strong here. If you have questions for John and I, you can ask them by sending them to brewstrong@thebrewingnetwork.com. It's best if you just preface it with Q&A, because then I can find them much easier when I'm doing these sorts of things. If not, that's okay. Try and keep it to one question per email. Put the most primary information at the top, and then additional details you can put in a paragraph below, so we can kind of get through those things. And if you're listening live, you can ask your questions in the chat or the comments section. Here's one. Let's see. No, I don't want to go into that one. All right. Tarantino asks, is it smart to keep a lager yeast starter at lager ferment temps before pitching?
Mm, it depends on how long. I mean, if you're, excuse me, I'm gonna mute.
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, it depends on your pitching temperature. So, your the temperature of your pitch should be within, ideally at the same temperature as your wort that you're pitching into. If it is, off, really the maximum is considered about 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Less than that is better. 5. I'd keep it within 5 degrees at the most. I like to be 1 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit off at the most, because when you pitch a yeast into a drastically different temperature wort, you cause a heat stress, and the yeast will spend their energy expressing this heat shock protein, whether it's going hotter or colder. They have to deal with that temperature change, and they're expending energy, and you're kind of jacking them up for your fermentation. So you don't want to do that. So I would, whatever your lager yeast starter is, I would try and keep that at the same temps, gently, change the temperature to whatever it is you're going to pitch into, or change your wort temperature. When cool conditioning an ale or lagering, should it be without CO2 aside from purging oxygen from the keg, or do you guys put CO2 to it for a while it's in this stage? If you're cold conditioning an ale or you're lagering a beer, do you have CO2 on it, John, or do you just purge the oxygen and let it sit?
Just purge. Although these days when I'm actually lagering something, then to me that means it's in the keg and it's in the refrigerator getting ready to serve. So I'm carbonated in it at the same time. You and I have talked about warm maturation in the past, where we are getting all of the fermentation and maturation reactions by the yeast done in the fermenter warm. So we know that VDK reduction is done, acetaldehyde reduction is done, the green flavors are gone. That beer is ready to drink, except for carbonation and maybe clarity. So then we do the cold conditioning, put it in a keg, chill it down, apply CO2, it clarifies and is essentially ready to serve. So yeah, I guess I said I would just purge, but actually because I've finished fermentation and maturation, I am carbonating in the keg while it's cold, clarifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same for me. I didn't, put a high pressure on the kegs. I would, keg my beer and then hook it up to, service pressure, which tend to be like 8.5 psi or 9 psi in the serving fridge, and just leave it there, and that was fine. Tarantino has another question, and again, one per email would be helpful, but I'm willing to go through them. It just takes longer to do these. Is there anything wrong with using your mash wort to make a starter?
No.
As long as the gravity's correct, that's fine. One of the good things you can do is you can take so let's say you've done your mash, you've run off your wort, right? And you collected all that. Then there is, your further runnings. You can collect those runnings and make starters out of that. And sometimes, depending on, what the gravity is, it could be a good starter wort. You may need to boil it to concentrate it up, or add a little extract to it, but those can definitely make a good starter. No issues with that. I'm not sure if what the rest of the question is. Can't really use priming sugar for making starters. You need to use
Need maltose,
maltose.
malt extract,
So,
or wort. Yeah. I mean, table sugar would work in a starter. You would grow yeast, but that yeast would no longer be, ready to ferment wort. It would be kind of shifted over to fermenting just table sugar in a worst case scenario.
Well, there you go. All right. If you have questions for us, for John and I, send them to brewstrong@thebrewingnetwork.com, and we will get to them. We need to do just a whole bunch of Q&A shows because we're, again, 400 questions back. So we narrowed it down, but we really need to buckle down and get through a lot of these. We appreciate your questions. We appreciate your support. The fact that you guys all listen means a lot to us, and it means a lot to our sponsors, Blickman Engineering, Brew Chatter, and all the other folks that advertise during the show. It helps keep shows like this on the air. So please reach out to them, feedback at blickmanengineering.com, and tell them how much you love the show and that you want them to keep paying for the show so you don't have to. Till then, everybody, brew strong.
Brew strong, everyone.